Hello, and welcome to this opportunity for you to learn, develop, and contribute more to your cause. Today, you'll hear from Jason Proulx, a PhD student at Simon Fraser University. You'll learn how our enjoyment of giving to charity changes in the short and long term, whether giving with other people increases our enjoyment of giving and generosity, whether collaborative giving can increase generosity over time, and whether charities should invest in encouraging supporters to give collaboratively. Enjoy. Jason, it's great to have you. So, we're going to be talking today about the relationship between collaborative giving, intrinsic enjoyment, and the generosity in charitable giving, because you published a very interesting paper on those subjects or the combination and how they relate together. So, just to get us started, do you want to define some terms for us and tell us what we mean by collaborative giving?
Sure. And first, I just want to say a big thank you to you and your listeners for having me. We did conduct a couple of experiments, probing those ideas together with my supervisor, Lara Ackerman at Simon Fraser University, and our collaborator, Alex Barish at New York University Stern School of Business. But really, to sort of define these terms, my colleagues and I really define collaborative giving broadly as really any type of charitable giving that you share or do together with another person or people. So, for example, you might think about a married couple who maybe discuss and make a joint donation to give to the Children's Hospital and thanks for treating their child's leukemia. Or maybe even a community gets together and uses an online crowdsourcing platform like GoFundMe to maybe support a local family whose house caught fire. But I even think things like giving circles are really great examples of collaborative giving too. So these could be these small groups of a few friends or even complete strangers who regularly pool their resources and donate together to causes that the group values. So things like Black Lives Matter or even supporting Indigenous youth.
Brilliant. And to add to the other part which we're talking about, I think we all know that experience of giving to charity. Some of us will have heard it. I've referred to it before as the warm, fuzzy feeling that you get. Why do you think that we get that, as an individual or when you give with someone else?
For sure, I love it. I think warm fuzzies is technically the scientific term as well. So I think that's what we use as researchers. But yeah, I think there's actually been a growing body of well-conducted experiments that sort of show that giving to charity or even spending money on other to help others can cause us to feel more positive emotions. And interestingly, I think researchers are consistently finding that people seem most likely to experience these emotional rewards of giving when they sort of donate in ways that help fulfill what scientists call their basic psychological needs. So these are basically needs to freely choose our own actions, to be effective and make an impact, or to feel connected with others. So basically, when charitable giving meets these needs, giving tends to be more intrinsically rewarding or enjoyable in itself to do, and we get to feel happier and these warm fuzzies as a result. So, for example, maybe if you spent like $10 to feed a family of five for a week, this feels like a really concrete impact that can help unlock the emotional benefits of giving. But if you felt maybe pressured or like it wasn't your own choice to give, you're less likely to feel those warm fuzzies of giving. But interestingly, I think this intrinsic enjoyment and potential for social connection is a really intriguing idea because people are this very natural social species. And so being able to use charitable giving as a way to connect with others can probably make it a lot more fun and intrinsically motivating and perhaps chock full of those warm fuzzies.
It's really interesting that there's seems to be a balance there between the agency of the individual feeling that they're delivering to their own psychological needs and then also the enjoyment of giving collaboratively. And then to add another layer onto that, you mentioned that we're naturally social, and being a social species, there's that. I suppose there's lots of layers that you can add. On one side, you're showing to other people in the tribe that I'm a good sharing person. And I'm also thinking around different people have different causes that they like to give to, and I wonder how both individual experience, but then also how the priorities of the immediate social context play into those giving decisions and the extent to which we enjoy then the amount that we give.
I think that's why I really enjoy this work, because there's so much potential here to really dig deeper into what collaborative giving is like, what the possibilities could be in terms of how people react in this very social context. And I mean, so far in the research, people have mostly only focused on giving in these more individualized contexts, but we live in a social context, and because we're very social species, we tend to change our behaviors or our thoughts and actions just simply being around other people, depending on if we think they're going to like us more, if we seem more generous, or if we think that they'll take care of donating because we can sit back and relax, and they'll do all the work. And so it's this really intriguing puzzle to try to figure out what pieces seem to be most important in affecting people's behaviors to give, because of this nuanced social context and the way people like to present themselves or interact with other people around them. And so lots of intriguing questions to sort of pry or look into, and we've only sort of scratched the surface with the work that we've done so far.
Well, I'm glad that you are doing the work. And one of the things that I was thinking when I was reading the paper was that in most circumstances, when I think about enjoyment, I think there's often a trade-off between short-term and long-term enjoyment. So, easy example is that if I have a burger and a salad in front of me, there's a trade-off there. I'm going to enjoy the burger much more in the short term, but the salad is going to be better for me in the long term, to really oversimplify the point. But it strikes me that charitable giving plays into both our immediate gratification of the warm fuzzies that we just spoke about, but then also our long-term fulfillment of, oh, actually, my self-image is that I'm a good person, and the evidence that I'm a good person is that I have been giving to charity. And I wonder what your thoughts are on that, whether there are trade-offs that I'm missing in terms of short-term and long-term fulfillment, and what you think.
No, and this is actually a really rich body of research as well. And scientists tend to give terms to these different types of happiness, either the short term or the long term. And so I just want to sort of clarify the terms there too. So what scientists call hedonic well-being is this more short-term warm fuzzies that we were just talking about. So feeling these more pleasurable, positive emotions like joy and contentment. But this more long-term well-being that you're sort of referring to, what scientists call eudaimonic well-being, is more this fulfillment that we get from living and acting in line with our values, engaging in more meaningful or purposeful experiences or actions that help us grow and reach that full potential to live this higher quality life. But I mean, you mentioned trade-offs, but interestingly, research actually shows that charitable giving can boost both positive emotions, like donating can make us feel more joy, but it also can help us feel more higher purpose and more self-acceptance and personal growth and flourishing as well. So this more eudaimonic well-being. And in fact, over the past decade, actually, there's been roughly 250 studies or so that have tested how generous acts like charitable giving relate to either this hedonic or eudaimonic well-being. And a few years ago, a group of researchers actually pulled together all of those studies and tried to summarize the effects that they found. And they saw that generous behaviors may actually more strongly affect eudaimonic well-being compared to hedonic well-being. So maybe this more sense of purpose or this meaningful activity that allows us to, live this higher quality life. And so I think it really does showcase that, charitable giving can be a very meaningful way to increase our well-being, but not make these trade-offs, we can feel that, we can have this short-term pleasurable warm fuzzy experience as we're doing it, but in the long term also get this boost to our own growth and living a higher quality life and this eudaimonic well-being.
I think it's just fantastic, isn't it? Like from as someone in the charity sector, it's always pleasing to hear that the evidence shows, if you give to charity, then you are going to feel better about it. So there's, scientific backing that giving to charity is a good thing to do for yourself as well as the cause. I To go back then to collaborative giving, we've established the enjoyment part of giving. So let's now look at how individual versus collaborative giving impacts on that enjoyment. Could you outline and try to steel man the arguments that collaborative giving make people more and then less generous?
Yeah, sure. And I'm happy, like, just as we were sort of talking about, like, it seems like there's this wealth of potential routes that collaborative giving could go in terms of affecting people's behavior, including generosity or how they feel. And so my collaborators and I really try to look through the data has been conducted so far and the research that's been done. And as I sort of mentioned before, a lot of scientists so far have really studied generosity in this more individual type of giving. But there do seem to be at least some useful theories to help us predict how, in this more social context, this collaborative giving might impact generosity. So, for example, based on what we know about people's helping behaviors in public contexts, we sort of reason that collaborative giving might decrease generosity because past work sort of shows that if people believe that others around them will help, we actually tend to feel less accountable to help or give generously. So people have this sort of thought that, why would I take responsibility and give more than I have to if others are going to step in and donate generously, right? So it is completely possible that collaborative giving might actually undercut generosity if having others around us cause us to sort of diffuse this sense of responsibility to be generous onto the people that we're giving with. But I think other competing theories suggest that collaborative giving might actually boost generosity. And in fact, I already kind of alluded to one earlier, where we were sort of talking about how charitable giving might give us the warm fuzzies. So I mentioned that people are really highly motivated to connect with others. And as a result, we often enjoy whatever we're doing to much more when we get to do it together with other people, right? So interestingly, people actually also tend to give more generously when they feel this greater sense of intrinsic enjoyment too. So a reason that collaborative giving might amplify feelings of intrinsic enjoyment because we're doing it together with others, and in turn, that might increase people's generosity if they're feeling this greater intrinsic enjoyment to give.
Interesting. And based on that research and that combination of studies that you looked at, I know that you ran 2 experiments, and I'd love it if you could run through each one in turn, because I know that they happened one after the other and you took the learning from one into the design for the next one. So it'd be great if you could talk us through both of those.
Yeah, for sure. So in our first experiment, we had over 100 pairs of unacquainted undergraduates who came into our lab, and we randomly basically divided them into 2 groups. So in the first group, what we called the collaborative giving condition, we had pairs discuss and make a joint donation. Whereas in the second group, what we call the independent giving condition, pairs just donated individually in each other's presence. So basically, we paid participants $5 each to evaluate a charitable advertisement for a local children's hospital, which they did either together or by themselves in the same room, depending on their condition. And then we just had participants in the collaborative giving condition pool their money together and then discuss and make a joint donation. Whereas those in the independent giving condition silently donated next to each other. But afterwards, participants then reported how intrinsically enjoyable they found their donation to be. So answering questions like how fun and interesting it was to them. And basically, overall, we found that people in each group actually donated pretty similarly, but participants found it more intrinsically enjoyable to give collaboratively than independently. And interestingly, people who felt this greater intrinsic enjoyment to donate, in turn, were more likely to donate generously. And then, if you want, for the second experiment, we basically designed it to be largely the same as the first. We'd have a new sample of just over 300 participants who we paid to evaluate this charitable advertisement to a children's hospital, and then they had this opportunity to donate to them. Right? We had some pairs do this collaboratively, whereas others we just had them do it independently in each other's presence. But interesting, in the second experiment, we added a third condition where a third group of participants gave completely alone in their own rooms. And this sort of helped us, benchmark the effects of collaborative giving against perhaps more standard charitable giving practices. And again, we found no major differences in generosity across conditions for this study, but participants in the collaborative giving condition did report greater intrinsic enjoyment than participants who gave independently or privately. And again, when people felt this greater intrinsic enjoyment from donating, they were more likely to give generously. So I think together the studies sort of showcase that collaborative giving may indirectly boost generosity to the extent that people find it more intrinsically enjoyable to give together than individually.
Interesting, interesting. And I wonder, I know that this isn't something that you've tested, but I'd like to get your intuition on whether the repeat instances of giving would then further increase generosity. So, the experiments which you ran are, fantastic, and they show that increased enjoyment. And I wonder whether one, that enjoyment would lead to people seeking that behavior again, and then also the repeat the repeat giving would sort of, I don't know whether it be exponential, but certainly increase the donations over time. I don't know what your thoughts might be of that.
Yeah, that is a very, very intriguing possibility. I mean, of course, we have to test this directly with more longitudinal experiments that track people's donations over time. But I think that's a really real possibility, and our data sort of suggests that might be the way things are going, right? So we've only looked at the short term, but potentially, if collaborative giving is something that people find more enjoyable to do, they're more motivated, they're more intrinsically motivated in and of itself to do. We know from past work that people tend to do actions that bring them intrinsic enjoyment more frequently. And so, to the extent that people are more intrinsically motivated by collaborative acts of giving, it's very theoretically possible and real possibility that people might be more willing to give more often and more frequently if they feel that doing it together with others it's a much more enjoyable thing to do. And by extension, just being able to give more frequently can perhaps increase generosity over time.
Well, so I suppose to bring it back then to the more concrete and to base it on what you've found, what would you say are the key takeaways for practitioners from the two experiments?
For me, I think the key takeaway for practitioners is that they really should give some balanced and careful thought to collaborative giving, and sort of reflect on whether it's worth spending potentially limited resources to facilitate. Right. So overall, we didn't find that collaborative giving was the sort of slam dunk to boost generosity. Right. There's no huge surge in giving compared to normal practices of giving individually. And I think that's important to note because collaborative giving can sometimes cost substantial amounts of time and money to use things like crowdsourcing or peer-to-peer platforms or even maintain giving circles. But that said, collaborative giving didn't actually undercut donations. And if anything, to the extent that people enjoyed giving together more than standard practices, they were more likely to give more generously. So I'm thinking that if practitioners can really implement collaborative giving in a meaningful, enjoyable and low cost way, it may boost donations in the short term. And as we were sort of just discussing, there is this real possibility that it could increase over time, since if people are intrinsically motivated to give more often collaboratively than individually, it might increase exponentially or increase the amount of donations over time. But again, that possibility certainly needs to be tested with more research. But perhaps, if you're intrigued by this idea and you have some resources, or you want to find some low cost ways to sort of implement this, maybe some concrete ways to do this could be to just have some campaigns that encourage donors to like grab a friend or and donate together, or maybe encourage communities or classes as a whole to give together. Because if donors enjoy this types of giving more, it may boost donations in turn.
Perfect. I love the practical, concrete takeaways. Thank you so much for this conversation. I've really enjoyed it. As I say, I really appreciate that there are people like you out there researching how donors give, and making our lives as charity practitioners, hopefully a little bit easier, because we know what people think and behave and feel when they give. Is there any way that people could keep up with you and your work?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a PhD student at Simon Fraser University. I'm happy to share my contact information as well. I have like a Google Scholar website that you can reach if you just Google me. But I don't have a formal website as of yet. But certainly I'm on Twitter at JD Proulx, Proulx. You can follow me there as well.
Perfect. And is there anything that I haven't asked that I should have asked? Is there any other things that you want to add before we close?
I think it's been such a rewarding piece of research that I've done my master's in for collaborative giving, but I am really excited to take this one step further and really go into more community interventions through my PhD. And so, as I was mentioning a little bit before our call here, I've been really intrigued by this idea of trying to cultivate really generous, well-connected, happier communities. And there are tons of different ways to do that. And one of the ones that has been super intriguing to me is this idea of connecting the young and the old, or people who experience disabilities, and really trying to foster these connections and empathy for people of diverse lived experiences. And so there's just been such a rewarding amount of work to be able to work with these communities and see whether interventions like collaborative giving or intergenerational programs like this can really build more generous but happier and more livelier and social communities. So I'm really looking forward to being able to continue that line of work with myself as well.
Oh, that's incredible. And it's such a noble cause. And I think, especially in the context of us seeing declines in fertility rates and aging populations and increased loneliness in older generations, I think that's going to be really important work. And if nothing else, I imagine it's going to be incredibly rewarding in the short term. So it's been so good to talk to you, and thank you for coming on and sharing. And I hope to see everyone soon.
Likewise, and thanks so much for having me.
Hello, me again. Your homework for this episode is to have a conversation with a colleague about whether you think the experience of giving to you is enjoyable. Do you think that encouraging collaborative giving is something you should explore? Don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And the best thing you can do to support this show is to tell other people. I hope to see you next time.